we have Tory Gray, the founder and CEO of a boutique digital marketing agency, Gray.co, where she does all kinds of things around search marketing, marketing intelligence, and data. She's also, very willing to share her knowledge about SEO, business leadership, and is a passionate mentor in women in tech SEO community. With that, I will pass the mic over to you, Tory.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Bernard. It's amazing to be here. We love the Clearscope tool, as you know, so we're excited to talk to everybody a little bit more about SGE and user-generated content in kind of today's world. So, we're going to be talking today, as Bernard said, about SGE, the search generative experience, also the AI things that Google is doing in general with their search results, and in connection with SGE, and how I think, I'm going to make a pitch to you today about how I think user-generated content can really help with that. So again, I'm Tory Gray, run Gray.company. We specialize in SEO, data, and market intelligence. And I was very lucky to, I lucked into a job in the e-learning space, which, has been doing UGC for a very long time. And they already had these items set up. So we were a site, Craftsy, and we created educational content for passionate crafters, cake decorating, knittering, what may have you. And it was a beloved brand, and we created patterns and we created projects. Were two examples of UGC that we used for our user base. Projects were a way to showcase what people made. So if you took a class and you made a sweater, you knitted that, or you made this beautiful cake in your cake decorating course. If you really want to celebrate the love of what you did, you can show it off with your projects. Patterns are like the blueprints, to architecture, but for your knitting patterns, for your crocheting patterns, for your quilts. And they were ways to enable people to make all sorts of things. And it was a really great place for me, about 4 years into my SEO career, to explore what does UGC mean, to really experience the pain of sometimes the quality that can come along with UGC, and how do we solve for that, because there's so much to be gained that I've been on my high horse about UGC for a long time. And now with SGE, I think it's more important than ever. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. First, I'm going to walk you through and make my case about why SGE and AI and the landscape today are, why UGC matters for that. Digging in again on the why and the how UGC supports those things are pretty intertwined. What you can make, we're going to do a little bit of brainstorming and see some examples, because that can be almost the hardest part. You can want to make UGC all you like, but how do you make that a reality? And then the meat, the logistics of how do we launch it, and what do you need to consider, and what do you need to control for. So what is happening around this world, right? We're going to go back in time a little bit. We're going to start in 2019, and suddenly we're hearing all these things about TikTok. It's becoming so popular, right, that Google, this memo leaks that they are suggesting that TikTok in particular, and its users are causing people to leave Google, and this is a threat. And this is around the same time, right, that Google is starting more their antitrust case. And so there's some speculation happening that Google's just saying this to be like, oh, I'm just little old Google, look at the new competitors, I can't do much. So we just didn't know. TikTok was still a relatively new thing that only the kids did, and we were seeing what's happening. Is search behavior really changing, or is it not? But suddenly people are talking about TikTok and all of its UGC. Then we see the rise of everyone adding on Reddit to the end of their Google searches. To some extent, that's because people are going to Google to look for things on Reddit, because Reddit search is not as good as Google search. Google is actually pretty good at search, go figure. But it's also because users are looking for things that they can't find on Google effectively. If they're not finding the answers they want in search, perhaps for product reviews being a really common use case there, they might add on Reddit to find the best whatever tool that you're looking for, to see what real people are saying. So, through the years, this is happening more and more and more, and people are obviously discussing this even on Reddit, to get a little meta on you. Starting in 2022, we start to hear Google talk about voices. So they're bringing more voices to search. They are exploring ways that they can counteract what's happening with TikTok, with Instagram, with whatever of the social channels. How can they showcase that more? This is prior to SGE, because that's going to come in 2023 in May. I looked this up to confirm because it seems simultaneously like it was yesterday and forever ago. How was this only last summer? But in any case, SGE was launched as a part of Google's I/O conference. They talked about these AI-powered snapshots, a little bit like featured snippets, right? But a lot of what they talked about in pitching this was talking about how to help users do more quickly with less searches. So the concept was, how do we take all these separate searches that people used to do, like Miami weather in May and dresses in breathable fabrics and dress code for outdoor weddings, all these different things that you have to research and understand separately in order to get to your final journey of, hey, what I'm ultimately seeking is, I need a dress, also shoes, for this event that I'm having in Miami, and I need to get it shipped here quickly, and I need to figure out all these separate things around it. So if Google wants to do this in a single search, how are they going to go about doing this is kind of the key question. At I/O, Google also announces perspectives. So this is related to voices, where we're very specifically bringing a lot of social interaction, which is UGC, into Google. This is living largely in Google Labs for a long time, but it started to launch more out in the world. We also saw forums suddenly start to show up in a big way in search too. In this example, Google is obviously testing with forums, but what I want to point out here is that Google actually put forums above video, above YouTube, above the second biggest search engine on the planet. Forums for a brief time was having that much prominence on Google, and that's a really big deal. And then we all woke up this year, actually twice. There were 2 mornings when this happened, when, hello, Reddit. It's everywhere. We cannot avoid it. It's perhaps frustrating if you're looking for answers and someone's asking for what they want to do on Reddit, and then someone's response is, I don't know. And then that's what's ranking #1 on Google. For better or worse, Reddit is Google's favorite thing right now. They're a little obsessed. Quora too, and some of these other sites to a lesser extent. It's really all about the Reddit these days, but it's all of these UGC sites. Like, we're in it in terms of UGC. So at this point, maybe you're just like, what the heck, what's happening here? I get that you've said that Google is obsessed with UGC, and we see that, but why? Why are they obsessed with UGC? And further, like, why the heck should we care? So if you ask me, and this is something Bernard and I have been chatting about, but one big reason is that information gain. It's obviously the new hotness in SEO, but a few years ago, I think 2 years ago, Google's got the patent around information gain. So to sum it up really, really quickly, information gain is new information that you can be including in your content. So if you are doing an article about the best toaster in the world, what are you writing about? What are you including? What are you including in your rich media that really does something new that nobody else is doing? Think new data, think new analogies, think new perspectives, think use cases that are maybe not covered in other places that really answer questions that are not being answered elsewhere on the web today. What can you add to your content that no one else has today? And I would make the case to you that there's few better ways to add information gain to your content than through users, because you can let your users do that for you. Users are going to think of the weird things, and they're going to say the weird thing that would never have occurred to you as a marketer, or you might not even have been able to say as a marketer. But as a user, they can go and say, this is the thing, and this is what you should consider, with their very detailed and unique experience that they've had within that. I also want to point out that information gain is actually pretty hard. I think we're all struggling to figure out, how do we do this information gain thing? And further, how do we do it sustainably? right? Because as soon as you create something in terms of information gain, you add some new meaningful thing and you publish it on the web, well, now the bots are going to crawl it, and then everyone's going to be copying you, and then suddenly it's not new to your site anymore. So how are you going to keep up on this? Well, again, we have the power and the scale of users. They're always coming up with fresh new ideas, their new perspectives of what that means. So with UGC, it is a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I'd argue that it can really help you do that. Another big reason why this is so important is because, believe it or not, people like people. This is to some extent a reaction to the rise in AI content. It's a reaction to the rise of spam. It's a reaction to marketing, right? This is our fault. This is SEO's fault. This is marketers' fault. We have created a web that largely repeats itself. And if we're chasing our own tail, and if we're creating the same copy and the same sort of content that addresses the same people and the same use cases time and time again, what are you doing that's new and different and better? And I think people are, they're seeking authenticity. They don't want corporate speak. They don't want polished. They want humans. They want people. And so humans like UGC. So Google likes what humans want, because that means they will come back to Google and search again. So people do, again, like UGC, even if it's not perfect, even if it's not accurate, even if it can be frustrating, it is authentic. And so there is something here that is meaningful that users are seeking that they're not getting today. So how can we do both? How do we be accurate and real and authentic at the same time? Finally, I'd make the case that, especially in terms of SGE, we need to figure out meaningful and scalable ways to get data to Google and to users about how these concepts are connected. So if you're looking for a dress that is going to work in Miami, that is going to need to be the right color to show off, to stand out. It's going to need to, look good with your skin tone. It's going to need to be breathable because it's outside and it's Miami, so you're going to melt. I'm from Florida. I know it's very, very hot there. This is a very important consideration because you don't want to be gross and sweaty at this wonderful event that you're attending for your friend, right? So how do you have all of these just separate concepts, and how do you tie that to a particular dress? UGC, again, is a way to do that, where you can get users to volunteer the information about their use case. And we're going to dig in a little bit more on that. But again, I think UGC can help. It's not just me. Google thinks that too. And that's the reason that forums and Reddit are all over search today. There is a reason that Pinterest has owned way too much of Google image search real estate for a very many years, to a frustrating degree for a lot of us. There's a reason why. So I would argue, even if and when Google themselves stop being so obsessed with UGC, even if Reddit is not as prevalent as it is today, it is still meaningful, and it still helps users, and that means it can still help your business. So instead of having conversations about, or instead of just having conversations about how do we participate on Reddit, how do we be answered, get our users to answer our product as the right solution on a Quora when people are discussing things in our industry, how do we be the thing that they're obsessed with instead? I think you can do both. So let's talk a little bit more about it. So at this point, you might be asking yourself, I'm sorry, so we should just all be going and adding forums to our site, right? Or we should be going to make the next Reddit, because that's so easy, right? Like just spin it up, make it happen. That's what Tory said, go do it. Yes and no. I mean, do it if you can do it, good for you. But UGC can be both big and it can be small. It can be fresh new content for your existing pages. It can be dedicated pages. It can be entire sections of your site. It can be entire brands and entire industries if we're talking social media. So we're going to talk through some meaningful examples. So again, using our SGE, we're going to be buying a dress example here. I believe this screenshot is from Rent the Runway, and they do an excellent job with their reviews. So they're not just collecting reviews here. right? They're collecting data in a structured way, and then they are sharing that data in meaningful ways with users who might also be looking to wear this dress at a particular time. So how do we make reviews more helpful for our users? And how do we collect and showcase that data? So we're talking things like dress fit. And where does that fit in different areas? Like a dress that's fitted around the waist versus a dress that's fitted on the sleeve versus it's a bell-shaped sleeve versus what's the length? What's the length relative to how tall you are or not, and how long your waist is or not? These are all very different things that are meaningful if you shop online. And if you have the ways in which our bodies are different matter for clothing fit. So we're talking fit. We're also talking style, color, in all the different variations. So whether it's lavender or purple, people use different words to mean relatively similar things, and users can sometimes describe it in the way that they describe it, and it might have regional variations in different languages that can be meaningful. We can speak to dress breathability. That's going to be important in Miami. But I mean, ultimately, what we're talking about here is user data and user insights at scale. With everything that means. So we can turn this into meaningful pages, meaningful reviews on a particular page here, or perhaps using this data to create new pages. So if we know that certain dresses consistently, people are saying they're tall and this dress works for them, or they're short and this dress works for them, can you now have landing pages around, hey, this dress works great for people that are maybe on the shorter side or whatever. It can be super cool. Even more examples here. So here we're talking a little bit more about, not just ways you can update existing pages on your site, but how do you add new pages to your site? So it's community templates on Canva. It could be community templates on Airtable. And this is my hint to Airtable. Why don't you have community templates? Because you should, because I would like to submit them, please. And thank you. That is my pitch. It is forum discussions. It is designs. It is patterns. It's crafts. It's projects. It's individual pages of user contributions. And it's also the categories of the ways that you organize those pieces of content onto. So like what we see here with Canva. So they don't just have, say, poster templates or just presentation templates. They also have LinkedIn profile banner templates versus Facebook profile banner templates. They have fashion and beauty templates for email drip campaigns, for follow-up emails, right? There's all these different unique keyword variations that create keyword landing pages. So suddenly you're taking a SaaS business use case and giving it an e-commerce-like facet and filter feel with all these different meaningful landing pages that are new ways to drive traffic to your site. So each of these categories acts a little bit like a product listing page, a PLP in the e-commerce world. So again, new ways to drive content directly to an individual piece of UGC, or the ways in which you collect your UGC together. Even more examples. It is the TikTok recipes that we know and love. It is the cottagecore inspiration that you see on Pinterest. It is the Quora Q&As. It's the customer Q&As that we see on Amazon or on e-commerce sites. It's Airbnb listings, it's Coursera classes, it's the events that we love on Meetup, it's the Moz blog, right? It is Content Marketing Institute and it's Search Engine Land when they allow for guest contributions. For better or worse, it's those LinkedIn AI-driven pages that users can contribute to because UGC is not the only way you can grow traffic, and it can be combined with your other ways to grow traffic. And it can add value to those pages. Right? It's also things like WordPress plugins and Shopify extensions. It's data studio templates that let users discover new ways to use your product, right? Not everyone who uses data studio knows how to make a data studio report, but a lot of us can download templates in the SEO world when we have our SEO reports. So if Aleda is wonderful enough to share a new template with us that does something we didn't know it could do, we can now benefit from that. And that means your user base of your tool can be used in meaningful new ways. So there's a lot of examples. This link will take you to even more because, again, I really love UGC. So at this point, Okay, this is lots of good examples, but like, what the heck do you do to align this to your business? It is brainstorming time. Hopefully these examples will help you get creative, but essentially I'm recommending you get back to the basics. The who, the what, how are you going to bring value to your, customers and consumers that engage with your product? How does that benefit your business? Who is the target audience? What are they engaging with? What is their need? And can UGC fulfill that need? Hopefully you can find that need in your search, your keywords. Do your keyword research and understand what people are looking for. Where do they have needs that aren't being met? I would also say that UGC is at its best when it is ultimately either the core product of the business, like an Airbnb, or if it is a way for users to engage with your product. So that's like the Canva example where they don't offer UGC, but they offer templates themselves that their business makes, but they also offer a way for the community to submit templates. And that means that people are using the tool, and then, in that freemium model, hopefully they'll upgrade and start to use your product more. So don't just make stuff. I'm not advocating out here for you to just make stuff for the sake of making stuff. Make meaningful stuff that makes a difference to people's lives. Make awesome stuff. Why? How will this benefit you? We've talked about SGE and we've talked about the AI. So yeah, hopefully you'll be showing up on Google a little bit more. But again, even before Google was so obsessed with UGC, it was meaningful in a lot of ways, and it will continue to be meaningful in a lot of ways. So in terms of SGE, in terms of SEO, again, we're talking fresh original content. We are talking impressions and traffic and rankings. We are talking topical authority, right? Because if you have all these different variation and all these different pages about things within your industry, that can help you really gain that authority. We're also talking links, because if users are contributing things to your site, if I, as an agency, am submitting designs on Canva that people are using, I'm going to shout it from the rooftop because maybe people like this, maybe people are engaging with this, and that means people will link to their stuff on your site. It also means that people who like that stuff will link to it. So lots of ways it helps SEO, but it's bigger than SEO. It helps in marketing. One of the biggest ways is it helps with signups. So let's talk email capture. Do you want to be doing email marketing? Because I would like to be doing email marketing for people that are in your industry, and we know by definition, know the thing and are interested in the thing that you want to sell them. That means they might use your tool. So we like that. It's also great social media fodder, whether it's, great images or videos to be using and showcasing your user community base within your emails, on your social channels. It's cool stuff to show off. And hopefully you're also monetizing this. So if you get signups, and then you can eventually get those users into actually buying your products, whether it's e-commerce world or, signing up for your subscription for your SaaS tool. We want that too. So these are all things that can be hugely beneficial from UGC. Brand, even more broadly speaking, you can grow visibility, you can grow awareness, you can grow mentions and engagement. It's honestly a really amazing way to grow brand loyalty and brand advocacy, because people are participating with. If you're celebrating with them the cool things that they are making with your product, they're bought in, they're here, they have skin in the game. It can be really meaningful to grow that, your NPS score. I also would make the case that this can be really amazing for growing your partnerships. So when you can show that people love your brand and are engaging with your brand, when you have that community base, when you have all those email addresses, that means other brands sit up and listen and pay attention to your brand and want to engage with your brand in meaningful ways. At Craftsy, this meant that we got to work with really cool brands like Michael's, the craft store, brands like King Arthur Flour, one of the very fancy flour brands for making your wonderful cakes and cookies. It also meant we got to work with Disney to make Disney-themed cakes. This stuff is no joke. It can be really, really meaningful. So next we're going to talk about how do you do this? What do we need to plan for? What do we need to prepare for? What are the actual nuts and bolts, the guts of how do we do this and make this happen? So first, we're going to talk about non-SEO things. We're going to talk about things that you're going to need to consider. So if you, as an SEO, are bringing UGC ideas to the table, who do you need to coordinate with to make sure this happens so that you're launching this effectively? So the first thing there's lots of things to think through, but one of the very first important things that I think executives can get hung up on is that they might not want to do UGC because they're afraid that people will think that the content that is from the community is content from the brand. And you need to separate those things out. And you can do that visually. Here again is Canva, where we have specific profiles for users, where these are community templates and they are shared by other people. So there's visual cues here to really differentiate and protect your brand and make it clear that this is a user and not your brand putting this out there. Very related in the other ways in which this can manifest, you do really need to think through your brand perception and what is going to be appropriate for your brand. Because what's appropriate for one brand, if you're selling underwear, is very different than if you're selling kids' books. And the images that work for one won't work for another. And you can't always trust users to only upload appropriate things. So you're going to need to think through, image use. You're going to need to think through URL setting. So an example here is Indeed. Lets you create, link to, and index different ways to group different companies together. So the funny example is I think we've all seen the shitty jobs board on Indeed. Nobody wants to be on that list, but it is a fun joke. But that's because a user could make that URL and they could share that URL. Do you want to enable them to do that or not? You can make that decision as a brand when you automatically set URLs based on this. Or you can do things like, looking for bad words and excluding those. You also want to think about that in terms of the headings on your page and any sort of page copy that's driven based on that. So if you have UGC and someone's uploading a picture of their pattern and they call it a thing, what are they setting as that thing, and what are your rules and controls to make sure that those things are appropriate for your brand? So it is the usual subjects. It is profanity, it is nudity, it's politics. You don't want hatred, you don't want any of those things, and you're going to need to think through solutions for that. You can do that through policies, through permissions. People have to sign things, automated checking and filtering. User-driven enforcement is those like flags of, that something's wrong here. This is fraud. This is report this. Someone should be reviewing this. You can do this manually. That's more like, if you have a user blog like Moz, they're reading everything before they post and they're approving that to make sure it meets their editorial guidelines. So different kinds of UGC can have different scale and different levels of checking based on what's important to your brand to make sure that it adheres to those rules. And again, the visual design that we talked about before. You also need to think through permissions. So just because someone put something on your site doesn't mean you have permission to have it on your site or use it on your site or post it in your email or social media programs. So you're going to need to work with your legal team to get the right permissions to publish, promote, share this content in a marketing fashion. You can set guidelines for tagging and accreditation. You also want to ask users confirm that they have permissions to share the content that they are in fact sharing, because users will share stuff that doesn't belong to them, right? Memes, videos, it's definitely a thing that people upload videos to YouTube or Disney, and then Disney does not like that. So these things should go into your terms and conditions and have a way to make sure you're protected legally if they do something wrong, as well as a mechanism for fixing it when you find out that it's wrong. Now we're going to talk about the scenario of if you're very lucky and you have enough UGC that it's meaningful, you could become the target of scam and spam. So this is things like fake customer reviews because you're Amazon. Amazon has to deal with that. If you are Reddit and now you're Reddit and you're everywhere, suddenly Reddit's got to figure out how to deal with weight loss gummy affiliate links and the whatnot. So these things that I'll be going through are not necessarily things that you have to immediately have all figured out in order to launch, but it is something to consider and to step up along the way. So strategically, you can think about things like, what's the benefit for users? Are they allowed to link to things off your site or on your site? Will you follow those links if it's off the site? Because that's a reason for a spammer to want to sign up for your site. And if you're going to allow them to do that, then you might want to have more stringent controls, right? Can they contact your users? So here I'm thinking of Twitter and like things happen in DMs that the Twitter wouldn't always approve of. So these things are typically very developer-led, and this is not something you as an SEO should be owning, but I want you to be aware that there are tools out there and that you should be going to talk to your developers and making sure you're answering these really critical questions. It can also be user-led, again, to the previous examples. You can use reporting mechanisms where, again, the report abuse button, and that goes to maybe customer service, and then people can dig into that. You can also have things like moderators, like the mods on Reddit, that help determine what things can and should show up and what we decide to take down. So talk to those teams. Next, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of SEO. So how do we get quality at scale? Because if you succeed at this UGC thing, not everything, every single piece submitted to you will be the most amazing quality ever. And so how are you going to control for that and really get the best advantage out of what is great and not have the things that aren't great hurt you? So strategically, I want you to think through, how do you get quality submissions? So this is the forms and fields that you use. Obviously, things like title, creator, a long form text field, but there is frankly just a lot of opportunity depending on the type of content that you want to create. And you might have different fields to prompt them to add new data. So if you want a user to submit information about their dress fit or their dress fabric, breathability, then you need to maybe consider creating a dedicated data field for them to fill that information out on. So thinking through these things ahead of time, creating the fields, maybe even showing prompts within those fields to give them the right idea of what sorts of insights should they be giving us. You can use character limitations or minimums. You can make them required fields or not. There is going to be a sort of a fine line that you're going to need to test your way into in order to determine how do we maximize the most UGC while also balancing quality, because the more required fields you add, the less they're going to want to submit that, right? And you need to get that balance right. But these are the conversations you should be having and something you should be balancing over time and getting better at and doing some A/B testing for. You can give examples, you can show value, you could consider incentives. So why would a user bother to submit UGC to you? And so sometimes you need to give users context of what is that benefit? And sometimes that's inherent. An example here is what Pinterest, like how surprised were we all when users were willing to submit all this very detailed information describing this image, giving essentially very detailed alt text about this image in order to save that to a board so they could visually organize and find these things again. So it doesn't always need to be monetary. It doesn't inherently need to be a contest, though those are tools in our toolbox for helping people want to do this and therefore give you more and better data. Next, you're going to want to talk through on-page optimization. So if your program is going to work and if it's going to scale, you do not want to attempt to be setting these manually, right? So really, you're going to be thinking about leveraging dynamic fields and having these systems work for you. So these dynamic fields can be based on the individual fields that the user submits to you. So perhaps the title of the item, you can use that to drive the heading on the page, perhaps your SEO title. You can also have the things that you've set around the data, like the categorization of where this thing fits in or the subcategory. You can use both of these things. So maybe your meta description is a set line like this: explore this category from users like username and add your own. Or you can use the open field description form that users have submitted to you. There's more than one way to get this right. Again, A/B test and explore and find the right answer for you. Also things like alt text, the URL, and finally, don't forget about how those pages link to each other. So if we have a pattern that is in knitting and it's about sweaters, do you have the data structure to know that it is those two things? And those links have, or those are links on the page, and you can go see other sweaters, and it has good anchor text, and that there's, you know, all the SEO things we want for optimization in terms of internal linking. We also want to talk through content groupings. So this goes back to that Canva example, where we're not just creating the individual pieces of UGC, we're also collecting them into the right landing pages, facets and filters, the right categories and subcategories. And how do you optimize those pages to be meaningful landing pages of their own? So do your keyword research, and also do your keyword research over time, because the ideas that you think of to start, those will be wonderful, but you'll also see new stuff show up in your Google Search Console data, and users will say the weird thing, and there will be weird things in your keyword data. So dig through and understand and figure out what you want to create ever more category pages about. And the last big one I want you to think through in this section is about indexing. So we want to, again, you know, related to those fields, what do we prompt users to add? What do we require them to add? And then there's a next level of what do we want to bother indexing? When do we want to have Google look at this content? And when do we maybe not want to bother? A lot of those lines can be around, you know, thin duplicate content. So if people are uploading videos, if people are uploading images, it can be thin content, right? And we know that page count doesn't necessarily, I'm sorry, not page count, the number of words on the page or character count or word count is not, it's not a Google ranking signal, and it sort of doesn't matter, but that doesn't mean that there aren't performance issues sometimes in some cases where there's just not much content. So how do we handle for that at scale? I would suggest you automate using the normal tools for indexation, so your robots meta, your canonicals, your robots txt, to set rules. And you can do that in conjunction with some of those form fields. So perhaps if a user added a title and they added a meta description that reads a longer required length, so you can have more rich copy when they have uploaded that image, they've added more details here and there might be a threshold upon which you start to index it. And maybe under that threshold, it defaults to a no index. These are rules you want to set on a global level, work with your engineering team to have that automation working, test that, QA that, and consider adjusting those rules over time. Though I would also say, obviously, it's not just about page word count, right? So things like, is the submitter really, really popular? Because if they are, it might not matter if they have as much content. Or if an item has that many likes, obviously the community is engaging with it and they're enjoying it. So use lots of signals, use the data at your fingertips to make smart decisions about indexation. And then the last piece is that I really love manual overrides. So going back to that example of this very popular submitter who is creating content that is amazing, but maybe has a low word count. So if that's how you're determining what's quality and what you're determining for indexation, perhaps if you had the ability to make specific exceptions, because this person got 50 links. So I don't care that they only added 3 words to this image, because again, it has 50 links. So it's meaningful and it's worth more than you might think. So set your rules for global things to account for your 80% of the cases, and give yourself the ability to manually override and say set custom metadata when it is meaningful, and a little tweak would go a long way to help the performance. Next, we're going to check through maximizing the return, so ROI. UGC works best when users want to make it and when they want to share it. Again, sometimes that's easy and it's inherent and they put something out there in the world, so they're going to want to share it, and sometimes not so much. But some of the simple things to keep in mind here is using clear language to describe what are you asking them to share, how should they do it. You'll want to think through how it will benefit them if they want to, you know, make sure your unique value proposition around your brand and your UGC is apparent. You'll want to think through which social channels. So what are the ways in which your community will engage with the web. So where are they? Are they on Twitter or are they not? Or X, I guess. And so will you show the Twitter button or not? Right? You can pick the ones that are meaningful. If users download and save, if users really want to print. So at Craftsy, print, like email and print more so than social media channels based on our audience and what was meaningful to them. So let them do the things that they want to do. So think of what's the right distribution channel for your audience. And again, you can consider incentives, things like contests, giveaways, shares, showcasing them again in your email and your social. Like people love that you've put them on display is an amazing example of excellent work. Who wouldn't be proud that Canva just showed their template, right? You'll also want to think through measuring your impact. So we talk about some of the returns. So this is like the specific KPIs around how do we measure that? So obvious things, rankings, impressions, traffic, backlink growth, content engagement. So pages per session, are people consuming that content? We'll want to look at micro conversions. So the count of UGC submissions, the reactions to those things, those comments. Bigger conversions. So did you get that email? Did you get sales? What's the average order value of someone who signs up that way? What's the estimated lifetime value of that customer that came through that mechanism relative to your other channels? These can be really meaningful. User sentiment metrics, loyalty metrics, advocacy. If you can measure net promoter score, if you want to look at your social share counts, your repurchase ratio, all of these things are really meaningful. So like anything, if you aren't measuring it, maybe you're not getting the most value out of it. So make sure you're doing a good job there. And the last big section is going to be around teamwork. So again, UGC is bigger than SEO. It's great for SEO and it's bigger than SEO. So work with your other teams. UGC, like any other channel, like programmatic, like any mechanism of scaling SEO, if it's done for SEO in a silo and only the SEO team is doing it, it's not going to work. So work with your other teams, work with your other channel owners, talk to email, talk to social, talk to your community teams, your sales and your customer service teams, your partnership teams. Don't keep SEO in a silo. We help each other. We'll have more impactful business outcomes when you can do it together. And I really want you finally to just think about your users and think about your business. This is content for people, by people, that hopefully provides business value. So don't build crap and expect amazing results. Do something meaningful and build something cool. So that's me. Thanks again. I really appreciate your time. You can find me all these places. And yeah, I hope this is helpful.
Well, that was fantastic, Tori.
Yeah.
I feel like as you were talking, I was reminiscing through my journey as an SEO, and I remember working on a consulting case for Strava, where basically the reverse of the spam was what was happening, because when you published a run or a ride or a swim in Strava, it would actually, I think by default, create a live page on Strava that was like, see my run or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And anyways, they got so many, Google manual like actions against them, because people would be like, see Harry Potter Philosopher's Stone 1080p my run, and then the people would put the HTML like
spam
links. So they wouldn't actually create links, but they would create the like watch it here, and then it would just be the URL text, and that stuff would rank for watch Harry Potter Philosopher's Stone 1080p. And they got so many, so much like, hey, you're like hosting malicious like content. And so all of that rings, I think, a very hearty bell. And then I think the other one I resonate with was like the prompting of quality submissions. I feel like SlideShare back in the day before LinkedIn I think like acquired them. Like they had this like really nice progress bar, and they like sort of
Mm,
graded you as you were submitting
yeah,
your
gamify that.
yeah. And I think that worked fantastically. So I'm going to start with a question that I
Mhm.
think, I was thinking about, but how can user-generated content best be implemented on, say, a B2B website
Mhm.
versus, like e-com or, marketplaces? I feel like different business models are
Yeah.
likely to have more or less friction associated with a UGC plan. So how do you see it differently for, say, B2B, e-commerce, online media as like three separate industry types?
Mhm. It's interestingly more similar than you'd think. So patterns and blueprints are templates, and templates make a lot more sense in the B2B world. So we might call it a different thing, but it is essentially, it's still the building blocks of what do we use and what do we make. So it's really like anything else. You know your audience and you know what they need and what they want. You know how you want them to use your product. So in the SaaS space, templates are often a winner, and it's part of what's, been so amazing about Canva's success. And so it's not different is my short answer. Like SEO is so much more similar than you'd think across all these different the ways in which they're similar are greater than the ways in which they're different, frankly. And it's just a matter of thinking through what is value, what's actually tied to the business, what enables them to use your product in cool ways, what enables them to share that and incentivizes them to want to share that. Um, and hopefully, it's the combination of users are looking for it and there's obvious interest you can tell SEO wise. Whereas what I see sometimes happen is I created a thing because I think people want a thing and I'm going to put a thing out there. And meanwhile, nobody's looking for it and your users aren't actually interested in it. So there is no search volume. Like, don't create things. You probably need both. You probably will see in your keyword data that people are looking for a thing. And you can look around and see how well is this need being met online. What is the competitive space? Design templates existed before Canva, but Canva executed on it better. And they also have their own templates. I think that that's meaningful. They have their curated premium things that you should use for them, but then they also allow users to fill in that gap and come up with all those funny little edge cases that are interesting and rank for all those long tail terms.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's well said. I think my follow-up question to all of this is that when I hear UGC program and a lot of the things that, you talked about with, prompting quality submissions, how we're going to group these things, how is it going to be indexed? My mind goes to this idea that it seems like a lot of development work is going to be required for a implementation of UGC across different business types and business
Mhm.
models. So how does somebody go about proving the case before extensive work gets promoted internally to say, yes, this like the UGC project or initiative,
Mhm.
makes enough sense? Like, how would you break apart an internal case building process to step by step, build a case that,
This
leadership
is
should then
meaningful.
say, okay, let's spend, a good amount of engineering time, then putting everything together.
Yep. Like most things in SEO, not talking about it in SEO terms, frankly, sometimes helps. And coordinating with other teams. So if social media wants things to share, if email needs things to feature, if your sales team wants customer stories that they can bring to the sales process. These are all things that have a lot of synergy and that they can work together. So if you're not just building a case for SEO, if you're talking about tools for your sales team, if you're talking about easy to find posts for social media that will make it that much more easy to get out there and be seen and increase your reach. Again, it can and should be bigger than SEO. So the first step is really just trying to sell it across your team and seeing what buy-in it is there, showing that it's a win-win scenario. And so your business case is, again, not just about SEO. And then you're doing all the normal smart things for putting together any business case. We actually have a blog post about this where we have a whole long write-up around how to put your business case together and why that's meaningful, but you're going to need to also quantify what's the size of the return, right? That's going to be a big one. You're going to need to figure out the size of the work and how do you do a minimum viable product, right? So think in software terms, work with your software teams. You're right, it almost always is an engineering effort. But if it's meaningful to the users, then that's meaningful to your business. And so but that's what goes on the business case when you're going to pitch it. Is it's a bunch of you coming in and saying, hey, look at the opportunity in the market here. I can prove it's data people are looking for in organic. It's not a crowded place. I think we could really own this. It would also solve this problem for this team and this team and this team. These are the results we think we can get. This is the signups and emails we think we can get that'll improve the email program. This is the sales I think we could get. This means we can own this much of the market. This means our visibility grows in this kind of way, so people know our brand. That can be really, really meaningful. I also think, frankly, talking about competitors is sad but true. One of the best ways to get any executive team excited about working on something is to be able to point to someone else doing it already. So either, maybe not even in your space, but if you can say, look what Canva did. That was part of their growth. Don't you want to be like that? Or in your own space if they're doing something meaningful and you don't want to be left behind.
Yeah. I think it does involve. I think what I'm hearing from you, and I can confirm it with my own, beliefs and experiences, is that, search engine optimization is a multidisciplinary role these days, right? It affects engineering, it affects design, it affects content strategy, it affects so many different departments. And I think, what I'm hearing you say is that, we need, as SEO content creators, to be thinking as holistically as possible, and not really just think about it as fix technical problems, build links, create quality content, but kind of more as a whole in terms of how does a user want to think about our space, and what are the steps they're going through, and how do we meet their needs at every stage of awareness and consideration.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, we have a question from Anonymous. They ask, do you recommend that brands use or repurpose review tools like a Bazaar Voice, Yotpo, Trustpilot, etc., to tailor user-generated content inputs for website experiences, or build something using internal developer resources?
Yeah, so reviews is one of the fewer use cases where there's existing tooling for that. If you don't have reviews today, buy something off the shelf and out of the box and implement it and see how that helps. Grow that first because they'll figure out a lot of things for you. But most of those tools are not going to have the dedicated fields, right? Rent the Runway built that on their own. They have a data team that understands what they want to collect and bring that in all the details in the ways that make sense for their e-commerce site. So the questions you might ask for Rent the Runway with its particular type of clothes is not necessarily the same types of questions you'd ask for menswear, right? Or kids' clothes. There's certainly an overlap there, but I think if you can incorporate custom software, that can be really, really meaningful, but it's also going to be a higher lift. So you always have to think about what can you MVP with just getting some reviews and seeing if that's a benefit, and then adding more to it over time, like grow it over time. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that approach. I think, something else that comes to my mind when I hear you bring up, the obvious success that, Canva had with all of their template ecosystems and all of that is, I think, to package content, like it can start with a blog post that, feels more user generated content centric, right? Something like, here is Tory Gray's, like content brief templates, and then, kind of post that. And then, I could see how that can be used as a way to, kind of build a case to then say, hey, Tory's blog post on, content brief templates has been doing so good that, can we turn this into, a broader, push? And same thing with reviews. It's like, maybe we just hard code it into the first like pass. And then after that, you can like say, oh, we got ranking improvements or whatever. I think that, the rest should be easier to convince the team about.
Yeah. And if that ask is coming from you as an SEO, I think stepping it up, frankly, is better and smarter. But a lot of the best UGC did not come from the SEO team. The SEO team is there to help manage it and make sure that that is, I'm picturing a rodeo and like a bronco, like how do we manage this growth is a different question from, what should we add in the first place? But executive businesses want to grow. And if that is really tied into their business, if like Canva, a template means, oh, then people are using our tool in order to make this. They can take a template, but then they have to tailor it and they have to use our tool. So they have to give us their email and then they have to make these tweaks. And then we can give them certain functionality, but hold back all the functionality. Do they want more templates? Do they want to save their brand kit? Like whatever that freemium sort of tier is, you can be smart and thoughtful about, but that's so core to the business that again, if you can have that angle, if you can bring the other teams in on it with their other asks, then suddenly asking an engineer to build it is not as big of an ask because it's really about your core business and how you support and grow that and participate with your community.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I think, some of my main takeaways, if not the main one that I hear, is that people like people. It's really not so crazy.
We're a
but
little sick of the corporate speak, and we're a little sick of all the ChatGPT content and the fake product reviews, right? Like we want real.
We want real.
So
we want firsthand. So to wrap it up, right? We're a little bit over. We're at the, couple minute mark after.
top of the hour.
This is a fantastic discussion. I feel like everyone here has gotten a great, understanding of how user-generated content can fit into their content strategy moving forward. What is one thing that you would like to leave the group here with the release of, SGE, all of the stuff going on in AI? Yeah, what are your last kind of best practices that you would like to wish upon SEO content creators out there?
Ooh, I mean, we're all in for a wild ride, aren't we? It's going to be interesting times, and I'm happy that Google is working so hard to make the search results better, even if they deny that they weren't great in the first place. And at the same time, that creates a lot of pain for a lot of us. So what I would like to see us doing is thinking bigger picture, thinking outside of our box. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm a broken record, but it's bigger than SEO. It impacts the total revenue of the business. It's about the business as a whole. So speaking that language, looking for synergies, coordinating with those other teams and making sure you're advocating for moving the projects forward that help the most of you. That is going to help you stand out. That's going to be more meaningful in Google search results. Because again, we know if you're a brand that people love, then you're going to rank high in Google. And so how do you be a brand? One of those ways is to have a passionate community of users who participate with your brand, right? So these are all part of the ecosystem. So work with your brand team, start to brainstorm. What can you be doing? Where can you be meaningful? And start to have some fun and solve some real human problems. Get out of your own head. That's what I say.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I think humanizing SEO, right? That's
You know, a
that's
little
what
SAI, a little more human. But both. Why not both?
both. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tori. This is
Thank
a
you.
pleasure, and we look forward to having you back at some point.
Appreciate it. It's always fun to hang out with the Clearscope team. So thank you so much.